Will the First Minister remind us what was the promise she made 7 years ago about the attainment gap in Scotland's schools?
First Minister.
It was to close the attainment gap over this Parliament. I think at the time I made that commitment, it was referenced as being within a decade. I still remain committed to doing that and happy during the course of this question and, of course, to talk about the progress that we're making.
Douglas Ross.
Well, it was to close the attainment gap, not to keep it where it was, not to narrow it a little, not to make some modest progress. No, Nicola Sturgeon wanted, and I quote, to close the attainment gap completely. But figures published this week confirm that the attainment gap at primary school is even wider than it was 3 years ago. It's wider for reading, for writing, for literacy and for numeracy. The attainment gap isn't closing. Since Nicola Sturgeon made this pledge, there has been no progress. Hasn't the First Minister failed to keep her promise to young people across Scotland?
First Minister.
No, and just to be precise, because I always like to be precise, the specific commitment that was made was to substantially eliminate the attainment gap, and just for the avoidance of doubt, that was the wording. That was the wording in our manifesto, and I stand by that completely. And pre-pandemic, the poverty-related attainment gap was closing. The negative impact of the pandemic cannot be ignored in Scotland or elsewhere. In fact, the Department for Education south of the border said this about the attainment gap. Disruption to learning during the pandemic has had a greater impact on disadvantaged pupils, so that's something that is not unique to Scotland. But what we actually see in the statistics published this week is that recovery is now underway, and we're starting to see improvements again. So the percentage of pupils achieving the expected levels in 21-22, which is what the latest statistics cover, is higher than the previous year for all primary school ages. In fact, we saw the largest single-year increase in primary school literacy and numeracy since the data collection began, and there is also signs that the attainment gap is again narrowing, with the biggest single-year decrease in the gap in primary and literacy levels again since records began. So that is the progress we are making. Was that interrupted by COVID? Of course it was, in countries across the world. But we continue to see that progress, and of course we remain committed to driving further progress. We also see that progress in exam results. They show the gap between attainment levels in the least and most deprived areas narrowing from the 2019 level, which was of course the pre-pandemic year. And we've also had university application end-of-cycle data in the last few days as well. A record number of 18-year-old Scots securing a university place this year, and the number of 18-year-olds from the most deprived areas has also increased by 31% since 2019, again to a record high, and again demonstrating the progress we're making on closing the attainment gap and widening access.